Welcome to the Sit Down Zumock podcast. It's the Z-Man, the Lawson's Chip Dip, Samoa's Girl Scout cookie consumer, the has-been baller, the Fire Festival Part 2 promoter, coming in full effect live and direct from Los Angeles, California, with a cold that I've been battling all weekend long, that I picked up in 75-degree weather in Scottsdale, Arizona for some reason. I moved to Los Angeles, California, and all I've been doing is getting colds. I lived in cold climate, Cleveland, Ohio, New York, for technically all my life, but I come to California, Arizona, I get sick, I lose my voice. Now I kind of sound like a cross between Demi Moore and Nick Nolte. Here's your goddamn dinner, Reggie. So forgive my voice. It's this is the best it's sounded since Thursday. So I just wanted to give a special shout out to Greg, Joseph, Elliot, Steven, Dave, Joey. I'm forgetting a few names. Just a few people that hit me up randomly, Instagram, email, Facebook tweets about the legend of the 818. You know, in fact, he's a legend of comedy, Brody Stevens. And my last podcast that I put out, it was going to be a Patreon only. I was going to put up just for Patreon. You can sign up for my Patreon, $3 a month for additional episodes and content. There's all kinds of tiers. You got $10 a month, $20 a month, $50, $100. You could sponsor the podcast. You will sponsor the podcast for $100 a month. My man Kevin Cerner was a sponsor for a long time. I'm still going to promote him since he's a good dude, big fan of the podcast, and a supporter of comedy. Especially he was a fan of Brody Stevens. I think we all were. But I kind of put a heartfelt podcast out. It was very raw. I got the news the day after it happened or the day it happened. Not sure when Brody took his life, but I got the information around 3 o'clock on a Friday, and that morning, after going down a wormhole of Brody Stevens videos and his TV show and crying, I decided to just kind of talk into a microphone, and it was very raw, very emotional, and a lot of people seemed to connect with it, and I didn't realize how many people really enjoyed. Oh, I knew he was well loved, but I mean, he's beloved. Everyone loved Brody. There's not a bad word being said about him right now, and it's I'm recording this intro. It is Tuesday, March 5th. We're doing a big show at the Comedy Store tonight to benefit him. A lot of surprise guests. I'm going up in the main room, and all of the proceeds is going to, I forgot the name of the organization, but some suicide awareness organization. I wish I had the information. Actually, I do have the information. Here, let me pull it up just in case you want to donate something. It's National Alliance of Mental Illness. All proceeds will benefit the National Alliance of Mental Illness. Also, I got to find the link. Let me see if I can put it up in the description, but you can there's a GoFundMe going around with Brody, and you can actually buy one of his t-shirts, and I think they're $25 and hoodies are $35, and 100% of the proceeds go to a GoFundMe that we're going to give to his family. I'm going to put it in the description. I don't have it in front of me. My apologies, because I just got the information last night about it, and it's a pretty cool hoodie. It's a great design. I just bought one, and I think it's a good cause. So if you don't want to sign up for my Patreon or pick up my number 5 album in the country, which I'm sure you already have, go donate to Brody. I would rather his family have that. He meant a lot to me. I mean, if you listen to the last episode, I was really heartbroken. One thing I forgot to say in the past episode is when I was driving here to live permanently, because I've been bouncing around the country like a madman for the past 4.5 years, I talked to Brody on the phone for 2 hours. I was driving from Omaha to Denver, and we were just talking about comedy. We're talking about politics, life in L.A. You know, I'll keep some of the conversations private, but we were going to do some shows together, and he was one of the main reasons why I was moving out here, because he was a friend of mine, and I used to produce a monthly show at the Hollywood Improv for a couple months, and I would always put Brody on, and Brody would put me on his shows. You know, I've talked a lot about Brody. You know, I'm not trying to like say enough's enough. It'll never be enough. I'm never going to let his legacy die. I will continue to talk about him forever. But I want to get to this week's episode because this is a great comic himself. Who knew Brody? I think everyone did. Before we get to this week's episode, let me get these dates out of the way. And don't fast forward. It's just like, I'm just 2 dates and we're good. Because I'm flying out tomorrow to Minnesota, Minneapolis, the home of Nick Swartzen. You got it. And I'm going to be at the House of Comedy in the Mall of America, Minneapolis. I'm there March 7th through the 10th. That's Thursday through Sunday. And the 7th, I'm doing a show with WWE superstar, Kent State alum, Cleveland native, Dolph Ziggler, Nick Nemeth, and the always funny Sarah Tiana. Sarah's one of the funniest comics out there. I'm not even going to say funniest female comics. I mean, she is technically, but she's one of the funniest comics. Great joke writer. I've known her for a long time. So I'm going to jump on their show, and I'm headlining the rest of the week. 2 shows Friday, 2 shows Saturday. Please come out. Love Minnesota. Shout out to Tammy Bronson, Rick Bronson, the Bronson family. And then I got some shows around LA. I'm doing a show the 16th, Saturday the 16th with Jim Florentine, Sam Tripoli. I forgot the venue, but I'm going to put it out on my Instagram. Follow me on Instagram. I'm with my new friend, Michael Rappaport, on Thursday the 21st in Ontario. I'm opening for Mike Rappaport. And all you Clevelanders out there, calm down. I know Mike Rappaport trolled Cleveland, and I just did a show with him, and everyone was pissed off. They think I'm Benedict Arnold. He's a passionate guy. He loves sports. He loves old school hip hop. I have a lot in common with the guy. He's a good dude. He's a big personality, and I got to be honest with you, we both hate LeBron. He was calling out everything about LeBron except he was on our team. And we took him back, and then he just bounced again on us like peace. And now he's failing with the Lakers, and I love every minute of it because him and Kyrie, they didn't realize how good they had it in Cleveland and how much we built them up. And they think they were invincible and these superstars, and they think they can go to any organization and turn it around, and now they're both miserable. So fuck Kyrie, fuck LeBron, and Mike Rappaport, you're a good dude. I don't agree with everything. I respect Cleveland. It's my hometown. It's a good place. But I do know he was trolling on purpose, so lay off of Mike Rappaport. Not that he needs my defense. Sorry, my voice is going out again. God damn it. I hope I could do the spot tonight. Hold on. Excuse me, I would edit that out, but I want raw footage. This is what it's all about. Speaking of Cleveland, Ohio. Oh, actually, we'll transition into this. Cleveland, Ohio. This next comedian I'm having on this particular podcast you're about to listen to is originally from Cleveland, Ohio, born in Cleveland, Ohio. I met him in Los Angeles when I started comedy, 2005. Met him in a coffee shop. He was writing in a notebook. We were doing the same show, and I put him up in the Comedy Store, I think. He came with me, and I remember, because I thought he was really funny. He was very nice, too. And we would see each other throughout the years. And, you know, I would say we stayed friends. And I always enjoyed when he was on stage. He's a great writer. He's a great comic. And we talk about comedy, him getting into comedy, us meeting each other, him, you know, being from Cleveland. And it's a great conversation. He has a great insight on how the business is run. So if you're a young comic, an old comic, we kind of talk about everything. We also talk about today's landscape in comedy. Very comedy-centric. I know some podcasts we'll swing off and talk music. We'll do all kinds of things, but this one's really comedy-based, so if you love comedy as much as I do or as much as a lot of listeners do, I think you'll enjoy it. We mention it in the podcast, but he has an album that you can get on iTunes, anywhere you get music. It's called Ryan Stout, Man in the Suit. You could follow him on Twitter at Stout Ryan. He's a great comic. He's been on Comedy Central. His stuff's on Raw Dog. He's hosted a million things. He's had game shows. I can't say nothing highly about I can't say nothing highly about him. I can't say anything highly about him. There it is. General Studies, Kent State, 7 years. Got the degree, 2.4 GPA. saying highly enough. I can't speak highly enough about Ryan Stout is what I'm trying to say. I think you'll enjoy this episode. Go to iTunes, leave a rating and a comment if you could. And you're always welcome to email me. I'll read your email on the podcast. It's chadzumock3@gmail.com. That's my personal email for my Patreon. Not my Patreon, my listeners. All right, before my voice goes out completely, one more plug, and then we'll hit the episode. You can listen to this podcast on Laughable. Laughable, it's an app. Download it. It's for free. My man Ned Kenny has come up with a cool technology where you can listen to podcasts, follow your favorite comedians to podcasts. Like if you go to Laughable, you put in Chad Zumock, you'll see all my podcasts come up. Punch Drunk Sports, Sam Tripoli's By Chad, and all you have to do is follow. Then you can see me go to other podcasts that I do. It's a cool app. I listen to I'm not even bullshitting you. I listen to all my podcasts on Laughable. It's free. It's easy. It's better than the iPhone podcast app they have, because that goes out. This one is pretty reliable. I drove through Denver, Colorado, through the mountains, and it never skipped. Even when I lost cell phone frequency, it still played. So check that out. Follow me. Follow Brody Stevens, because if you love Brody as much as I do, he did a lot of podcasts. So you can go search through the podcast through Laughable. And you can follow today's guest on the Sit Down Zumock podcast, comedian Ryan Stout. That's a wrap. Bunch of bullshit. Bunch of bullshit. Bunch of bullshit.
Sit down, Zumock.
Hit me.
Sit down, Zumock.
Like the Comedy and Magic Club is talking about doing their podcast, but they're talking about doing one podcast.
For the club?
Yeah.
Oh, I could see Richard get behind that one.
Well, what they're trying to do is really plan out kind of
Just to let you know before you say anything,
an
we're
arc of
recording.
interviews. Yeah, it's fine.
I slide right in.
No, that's fine.
Slid right into your DMs.
Yeah.
So
they're trying to really put in the footwork to figure out, what is the show and where do we want it to go?
Sure.
And how are we going to sustain it? And they want to do that before they hit record on the first episode, which is unlike most people podcast.
Right.
Most people just go, I'm just going to talk to people and then we'll see what happens.
Right.
Which I hate.
And welcome to the Sit Down Zumock podcast, where we just talk and see where it goes.
How many years have you been doing this?
Since 2013.
Because I was looking through our text messages, and the first time you invited me to do this was 4 years ago. And I was coming to Cleveland.
Yes.
And the Cavs had 3 years ago.
Yeah.
The Cavs had just won. And I got stuck in Minneapolis.
Yes.
So I didn't get in time. And then all of a sudden I'm back here and I'm like, hey, do you want to do Thursday? And you're like, nah, I'm leaving town. And then I have another text from you. Hey, how's the next week? And I'm like, nah, I'm in Atlanta. And so that's been our entire text message thread for years, is just, hey, man, you around to do the podcast? No, I'm not in town. There's a record of it.
You've done more research to this podcast than I have.
I know. And all it took was looking at your message saying that you're parking and then scrolling back. And I was like,
I just saw online you had a new album. I'm like, oh, let's get Ryan on the podcast.
Yeah, that's all the research you did. You're like, okay.
No, but I have a list of comics I want to talk to. You were definitely in the top 10. So
Sure.
if that means anything.
Well, what do you want to talk about?
Well, let's just go. Let's see where this goes, according to the Comedy and Magic.
You're the one who saw my album online and was like, well, we got to talk to him.
Well, let's promote your album. For
Okay,
Christ's sakes.
Man in the Suit.
You wear a suit, so that works out.
Sure. It's album number 3.
Can I stroke you real quick? Like verbally?
Okay, yeah, for the listeners.
You're a great comic.
Thanks,
you're a
dude.
very, very funny comic. I haven't heard the album, but you're one of those guys, if you're on stage, I'll go in the room and watch.
Oh, thanks, man.
You're
That
a
means a lot.
wordsmith. You're one of those guys who should be in the discussion of really great comics that are working right now. And I mean that. It's not just a ball washing thing. It's just that's why I wanted you on the podcast.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it has been nice, putting out this latest album and hearing from people who I haven't heard from in a while.
Yeah.
Who are like, hey, I heard the album. It's really good. Why don't you come do my show? And so
Oh, that's great.
I didn't even know. I'm one of these people that actually listens to albums.
Yes.
And so I always got the.
You're also a guy who writes on a notebook still, right?
Sometimes, yeah. But I always got the impression that we have a lot of peers who literally don't listen to anything that's not theirs.
Yeah.
They don't give a living shit what anyone else is doing.
Yeah.
And when they put out their work, you listen to it and you go, are you just unaware of what other people are doing? Because
Right.
this is so either stale or just like lacking. There was, and I'm not going to name names because I really hate when anyone publicly bashes a comedian.
Sure.
Because comedians get bashed enough already.
Right, yeah.
There are literally people out there who have never cracked a single book about comedy, but they will tell you all the comedians they don't like.
Right. And you're talking about Sam Tripoli.
Well, Sam likes to do that across the board with every topic.
He quoted you the other day on our podcast. We do Punch Drunk Sports.
Yeah.
And he said you had a tweet about men and women, or women and equality. I forgot what the tweet was, but he quoted you. I forgot what it was. The Ari.
Interesting.
You said something about women and comedy and equality. Do you remember this tweet? No?
I remember posting something about, if I'm booking a show and I'm going to book 3 men and 3 women,
Yes.
I will reject roughly 140 women,
That's the
and
tweet.
I will reject roughly 1,400 men,
That was the tweet.
and we're going to call that equal.
Yes, that was it.
But I booked 3 men and 3 women, so it's fine.
Yes.
And what's interesting is I got a lot of nasty messages from women, and I simply responded, "But I'm booking 3 men and 3 women. It's
Yeah.
equal.
Yeah.
It's the same."
That
And
is-
I just got to keep repeating that to them. And they're like, but what you're saying is, and you're not considering. And I'm saying, no, I booked 3 of 3. It's the same. It's the same.
And you're just bringing logic to their face, and they still want to argue.
Well, I'm giving them exactly what they want.
Yeah.
And it's still not good enough.
Right,
Which is, another thing. But what I was going to say was there was this comic who
You're fine.
put out an album, and I listened to it. And there were huge gaps with no laughs,
Yeah.
and a lot of just talking, a lot of explaining,
Way to
and just
describe
more
my album.
gaps. And when the audience would laugh, it was like clearly a very polite crowd,
Sure.
giving a small laugh. But the comic never got them to a place where they're like clapping. They never got them to a place where it was like sustained laughter. There's one point on my album, my very favorite moment on the album. You hear this woman, she's just laughing so hard, and then she's going, I can't. I can't.
Yeah.
And she needs a break.
Yeah.
Because that's where we're getting her. We've brought her to that level. She needs a break. Versus these audiences that on people's albums where it's like clear it's their friends or family or just a nice group of people who want to come out and support, and they sit silently, and then they laugh when they think they hear a punchline, and then they go silent again.
Right.
And it's so polite and nice.
Going back to what you were saying, though, there are a lot of comics that do listen to albums. They just pretend they don't.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why they would do that.
They keep on a whole thing. So, I honestly did not. I'm going to listen to it. I promise.
Thanks, dude. Yeah. You've got time.
I know. I pay attention. No, because I listen. Like my favorite album of last year, and I've talked about it, and I've actually helped get this album out there. And he's told me it was Mike Vecchione's album. It's one of the best comedy albums I've heard.
Yeah.
And I laughed so hard. I listened to it like 7 times. I told Kreischer, and I just wanted people to know. And he says because of that, people started paying attention because I was being a megaphone for him.
Sure. No, that's great. And Mike, that's what, his 3rd album?
I would think so.
Yeah, somewhere around there. Because
yeah.
You've got 3, right?
Yeah, but I'd say 1 and an EP.
One and an EP?
Yeah, that's what I would call it.
Why? What's the EP? What's the length?
It came out at 37 minutes, but I have another thing I want to release. And the only reason I did it is because the whole sound exchange thing.
Yeah.
I just want to get things out on the that's $46 a play. So
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing is people don't realize that LPs used to be 20 minutes one side, 20 minutes on another. So most of Steve Martin's work, his longest album is 39 minutes.
I didn't know that.
His shortest album is like 33 minutes, and it's got a bunch of banjo playing in it.
I didn't know that.
And so there are comedians who are releasing albums that are 37, 38, 39 minutes, and they're like, yeah, it's not a real album. And I'm like, it's longer than a lot of the classics.
Right.
You should be totally fine with that.
I didn't know that. Look at you doing your homework and paying attention.
Yeah. Well, and even I was talking, I think, with Nick Youssef about...
Did you get Ryan Stout's new album?
did you get it?
I haven't yet. Okay.
Uh,
Where can I get it?
Everywhere. Wherever you listen to things.
iTunes,
Of course.
for sure.
Of course. Yeah.
There you go.
grab
Look
it.
at that. Like I'm a
Yeah, you're a
street team.
megaphone.
I'm
You're a
street team.
megaphone.
Yeah.
Nick was saying that just because of the way that technology is moving, and even what you're talking about with,
Right.
with streaming plays, that now there's almost a value to just releasing stuff. There's
Yeah.
no set standard that it has to be an hour or 50 minutes or a full headline set. It's like, hey, just put out a clip.
Yeah.
And I tell people all the time, just get clean audio that's high quality.
Paige, you look fantastic for the record.
Paige, you look really good. I wish the podcast listeners could see you. It's real. The beret does it. That really does it.
You're fine, Rita. We're just. I'm talking to a fellow Clevelander.
Hello.
Yeah. Do you know Ryan Stout?
Baker Mayfield's my man.
I know. You were looking at me confused for a second. I was like, Rita, you know who I am. I'm not wearing a suit. That's the confusion. Yeah. That happens a lot.
See the man in the suit.
Man in the suit, yeah.
We put that in a pin right there.
And even that, that's the opening track, because I know that in 2018, 2019, when I walk onto the stage looking the way I look, that's instantaneous judgment from a crowd of people.
Yeah.
And that's what the whole first track is about exactly how they're judging me based on current politics and even a little history of, what was happening when, 2007, 2008, housing crisis, banking crisis. I walk on stage looking like the man in the suit and just watching people angry. Where's my money?
Well,
You look like a banker. What have you done to me?
the one thing I've noticed about you've had that look for as long as I remember.
Yeah.
That's been your thing.
I put on a suit I was 21 years old still.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was April 2004.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've always been very professional about this profession.
Thank you.
I've noticed that. Like, I remember when I first met you, it was at a coffee shop, and you were writing in a notebook, and you were like, boom, 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 and I had you come out to my show in Beverly Hills. When I first started, I didn't know even what I was doing.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
you always had this professional approach to it, which I admire because I'm such an unprofessional.
I hear that from a lot of comics that they say, I hear guys all the time say, yeah, I don't even know what I'm doing up there half the time.
Yeah.
And I just look at him and go, well, why don't you think about it?
Yeah.
You've got all day to think about it.
Yeah.
The whole idea of wearing a suit and tie was simply so that people would know that I did think about this.
Yeah.
That I prepared a show for you guys. You guys can sit and listen. You don't have to heckle. You don't have to try to take control of this. You could sit back and just let me do this.
Yeah.
And it's oddly enough worked out pretty well because audiences everywhere just kind of do the same thing. They kind of go, well, he looks like he knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
I'll just let him do that. I get heckled a lot less than most people.
I think I tried to mimic you at one point by wearing a sweater vest.
Okay.
For a few years, and it became a thing.
Okay.
And I broke away from this little monster that I built back home. But I remember I was like, I gotta have a look because I'm just a normal dude. What's my look?
Sure.
And
sure.
And at one point I was just like, I don't want this to be my look anymore.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
There's a lot of trouble that comes with traveling with suits and getting to a hotel and having to steam them out and iron a shirt and pick a tie and going through photos. And I'm like, am I wearing that tie again? God damn it.
Yeah.
Had somebody told me they were going to be taking nice pictures, I would have worn a different tie.
Yeah.
And
Have you ever forgot the suit and performed without it?
It happens. It was probably one of the
Do you
best
feel
pieces of advice that I got when I started wearing the suit in my early 20s. Jim Short, actually, he said, Ryan, I don't think the suit's a bad idea. He said, but you don't have to be the suit. You don't have to become it.
Yeah.
Like you shouldn't need to wear it to do comedy. And just fortuitously, I was working with Greg Proops soon after that, and he got into town and the airline had lost his luggage. And so he was not wearing his suit.
Yeah.
And he went on stage and had a great show, and it was what it was. And it just reminds you, I'm not Iron Man. I don't need the suit.
Yeah, Superman can fly without his cape.
I can just get up there. And so a lot of times I will do open mics and things, just dressed however I may be, especially if I'm in town, like after traveling and I'm going to like the open mic at a comedy club, and then I'm supposed to headline the rest of the weekend. I'm not going to dress up for the 12 open micers.
Sure.
I'm going to show up with whatever I wore on the airplane.
Yeah.
There are no rules.
There's no rules. There are no rules to what we're doing. Where did you start doing stand-up comedy? Let's start from the beginning.
I think I started in San Francisco because that's where I started getting up like every night.
Right.
I had done a set or two in El Paso, Texas.
Did you move there for college or did you live there?
In San Francisco?
Yeah.
I moved there to do stand-up and then went to college
Moved
there.
from where?
El Paso.
So
Texas.
you were in So you were born in Cleveland.
Yep.
And then you moved to El Paso?
Yeah. My dad worked for General Motors.
Okay.
So that's where they moved him, and that's where I was till I was 17, and then I did a year at the College of Santa Fe, which is now closed. A lot of us went to the College of Santa Fe because Annie Letterman was at the College of Santa
Really?
Fe. Andy Sell, I don't know if you know Andy Sell, funny comic.
No.
There's one more. I can't remember who it was. You'd think it would be obvious.
Well, you know what I'm noticing about these small schools? A lot of good comics come out. I went to Kent State University.
Okay, yeah.
And I was talking to Tammy Pescatelli. She went there.
Okay.
And we're talking like Steve Harvey, Arsenio Hall, Drew Carey, just to name some heavy hitters. Michael Keaton, if you want to throw him in that category. He did some stand-up.
Yeah.
If you want to throw some real heavy hitters, Ryan Dalton.
Say no more.
Steve Byrne, John Caparulo. Like there was it's just a small Division I MAC school.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'd like to do some sort of documentary on small schools that produce a lot of comedians.
San Francisco State had a lot. A lot of people attended San Francisco State and did not graduate.
Really?
Margaret Cho, Greg Proops, I think Dana Carvey attended but did not graduate. Ryan Stout attended and did not graduate. Chris Tinkle. Do you know Chris Tinkle? Chris Tinkle
familiar.
did graduate. He was kind of around the San Francisco scene the same time I was, and then he moved to New York and was doing a lot of things in New York. And he's another one of these classic straight white guys. Has 3 albums that you can listen to.
Right.
But nobody knows who he is because it's hard to get on TV.
Sure.
It's been very strange watching how people have made a really big deal about instead of the work that gets done, instead of like, well, what jokes did that person tell that were really funny? Instead, they make a big deal about the list of comics and what does the list look like, and does the list have enough diversity? And you go, but I don't give a shit about lists.
Yeah.
I didn't get in this to be a list maker. I don't even know who's on the list sometimes when I'm performing. I'm walking onto the stage to do my job, which is tell jokes.
Yeah.
But what's very funny is the people who are very obsessed with the list, they realize that they don't realize that once you parse out everything, you're basically saying, we don't want the races to intermingle and compete, and we don't want the genders to intermingle and compete, and we don't want sexualities. We want everybody to have their own category. And essentially what they're saying is, okay, well, now all the straight white guys compete with each other. And what do you end up with? A ton of straight white guys that nobody's ever heard of, who all have a massive body of work.
Yeah.
Like the number of white dudes who have 3 albums, I could just Jeremy Essig out of Cincinnati.
Louis. Oh.
Yeah, St. Louis.
Yeah.
He goes back and forth between those two. But Greg Warren is back in St. Louis. You talk about Dave Waite, who has 4 albums. You talk about Ryan Singer, who has 3, probably 4 by now. There are just so many white guys with 3, 4, 5 albums. I just met Steve Sabo out of Toledo. He's got 6 albums.
Yeah, Steve Sabo's. Yeah, I've done a lot of his one-nighters.
Yeah, and I'm sure there are people out there listening to this going, well, I've never heard of Steve Sabo. Right, because he's just a white guy who created a whole bunch of goddamn comedy.
Yeah.
And it's so weird because when I start like looking at other people who have created a lot of comedy who are unknowns, I'm not finding a lot of people who aren't straight white guys.
Yeah.
And it's just weird because
well,
as a guy
going back to your tweet,
yeah,
like this is the percentage, like what you want to, whatever you want to say about women and minorities or whatever you want to, like there are more white guys in this profession, like it's just a numbers game.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and it's I wouldn't even care if there were if even if there are fewer women, there could still be fewer women who have a lot of work.
Yeah.
And so I always ask, I'm like, well, who are the women that are getting ignored?
Yeah.
Name the woman who has 4 comedy albums who we're currently ignoring.
Yeah.
And it's almost unheard of because if you're a woman and you have 4 comedy albums, chances are you have an agent, you have a manager, you get to tour, you get to do all sorts of things. And you go, all right, so who are the women that are failing at this?
Yeah.
That's what I would like to know. Because if there's a lot of men doing it and there's only a few women doing it, well, I can name a lot of men who are not getting notoriety. Give me some women who aren't getting notoriety, who have done a lot of work.
Well, Ari Shafir just said that on our Punch Drunk podcast. He said someone was complaining Whitney Cummings only had 3 spots in 1 week at the Comedy Store. Well, Whitney Cummings probably put in for 3 spots. And she got 3 spots. She probably put in for 2, but they said, let's hope she shows up for the 3rd one.
Yeah. And Whitney is another one that she has a large body of work that
Yeah.
people could find on Spotify or iTunes or whatever. And you go, yes, Whitney's created 4 hours worth of material, but she's also got representation and money and heat in Hollywood, and she had a lot of help doing that.
Right.
Versus Steve Szabo, who has 6 albums, living in his house in Toledo, had to do all that hard work on his own.
Yeah.
And you go, okay, well, that's not equal.
Well, I always talk to comedian Godfrey, as I keep name dropping everybody. He always says this is the only profession where hard work and talent doesn't get rewarded.
No.
You look at professional sports. If you're great, talented, you're a great athlete, guess what? You're going to go to the NBA, the NFL, or Major League Baseball. But for some reason in this profession, that doesn't seem to be the case.
Well, my theory about that is that the audience doesn't care. They don't care if it's good quality work or if it's shoddy, cheap work, as long as they like the work. And that's a huge difference between, what we do versus sports, because the audience does control your success.
Sure.
And, I've gotten standing ovations before, and then the audience walks out and they don't want to make eye contact with me.
That's odd.
And I'm like, listen, I didn't make you stand and clap.
Yeah.
You could have refused to clap and it would have been fine. But you chose to clap, you chose to stand, and now it's after the show. I'm trying to sell merchandise. I'm trying to say goodbye to people, and you won't even look at me?
That's odd.
What the hell is going on there? You chose that I was good. That was your choice.
Yeah.
So that's one of the issues, that the audience cannot discern between quality work and cheap work. But the other problem is, it's kind of an issue too with who's putting money behind stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
Which is nobody, because they can't make money back.
Right.
There's nobody investing in stand-up comedy. People invest in paintings. They'll buy a painting
That's
for $1 million,
interesting.
hoping that it goes up in value. You can't invest in stand-up comedy in any way, because the value of a joke drops as soon as it comes out of your mouth.
Yeah.
You tell the joke, the audience laughs, and they go, okay, that one's worthless now. Because if you tell it again, we're not going to laugh.
That's interesting.
So in our capitalist society, if you don't have something that's of value that can increase in value, it is worthless. And because rich people aren't interested in stand-up, they don't give money to schools to teach stand-up. And I love how people always insist, well, you can't teach comedy. You think you're going to teach somebody to be the next Richard Pryor? You think you could teach somebody to be Carlin? I'm like, we teach music all the time.
Yeah.
We don't teach it so that somebody becomes the next Johann Sebastian Bach. We don't teach it so that somebody will be the next Jimi Hendrix. We teach it so that consumers can be better goddamn consumers.
I think the wrong people are teaching it, though. It's always like the average road hack or the guy who's trying to make a fast buck.
Well, that's a different thing, because they're teaching people how to do it.
Yeah.
Versus when you talk about music or even poetry or art, we teach students in public schools about those things all the time, and it's just to inform them and let them sit back and be more informed consumers. Mm-hmm. So...
this is interesting. No one's ever came at it from this angle.
Well, I mean, you could easily teach people about the history of stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
There's no rules against that. You could teach people about how to create a joke and joke structure.
Right.
Simply so that there could be college kids who are like, yeah, I took joke structure 101 and I'll never look at jokes the same way again. I'm not interested in comedy, but I took that one introductory course to fulfill a general education credit.
Right,
right. Just to have some new knowledge. Because for God's sakes, they took fucking poetry 101 to fill that general education requirement, or they took music 101 or dance 101. We're not trying to teach people to be the best fucking dancers in the world. We're just trying to teach them a little bit about the art form.
Right.
But as far as teaching comedy, we teach nothing.
Yeah.
And so the consumers learn nothing. Rich people don't care about it. And because rich people don't care about it, they don't give money to schools to teach it. Schools don't teach it. Consumers don't know about it. And now all of a sudden it doesn't have any fucking value.
I notice a lot of rich people did not invest in Judy Carter's book.
They did not, but she sold a lot.
She did.
She sold a lot to those of us who wanted to figure out comedy. And I'll say, for a 14-year-old kid in El Paso, Texas, I tore through that thing.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think we all kind of. I mean,
It's only now that I can see kind of some of the holes in it. But she's trying to teach algebra to people who,
Right.
will need to learn calculus eventually.
I still go back to that book, and I still mail my VHS tapes to clubs.
Oh, yeah, you got to send them. You got to send them. And a lot of those clubs are closed. That was great, too. The back of the book had all the club
Yeah.
addresses.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
just going through now and going, nope, Albuquerque is not there anymore. And Kansas City is not there anymore.
Either's your college. So you went from there to San Francisco.
Yeah.
And from San Francisco, that's when you started comedy.
I had done stand-up probably when I was like 17, and I had done it at a few like very open mics in college.
Yeah.
So people were doing poetry, people were doing like acoustic guitar stuff, and I was telling jokes. But it probably,
Where'd you get the bug?
well, like I said, I was 14. I was reading Judy Carter's book.
Okay.
So
How do you come across Judy Carter's book at 14?
I went looking for it.
Was a comic? Were you watching comedy on TV where you were interested?
I don't know if I would be a stand-up had I not grown up during the 1980s.
Yeah.
Because stand-up was everywhere. And then by the late 80s, it was on television all over the place.
So you were watching The Tonight Show and you're watching HBO
We're
specials?
talking A&E's Evening at the Improv,
Yeah.
stuff on HBO. Comedy Central launched in the early 90s, and they were showing a lot of stand-up. And I was 9, 10, 11 years old watching TV going, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Was there a particular comic you gravitated towards that you really enjoyed, like an inspiration?
I got off stage in St. Louis, and the club owner, or not owner, but the club manager.
The Funny Bone?
Yeah. Matt, he was like, did you watch a lot of Larry Miller as a kid? And I said, you're the only person to ever say that, but yes, I did.
Wow.
I did. That's an amazing pull. I watched a lot of Paula Poundstone, her special, Cats, Cops, and stuff.
Wow.
That was out.
You're old school.
That came out, I think, in 1990 on HBO, and then by 92, it was on Comedy Central 3 times a day.
Yeah.
I remember watching a lot of Bill Maher, as not doing stand-up, but panel stuff.
As a young kid, like being attracted to those comics, that's interesting.
Yeah, it was Stephen Wright was interesting as well. I wasn't taken by there were comics that would do Evening at the Improv that would be like prop comics.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of
as a young kid, I was
underwhelmed.
I was gravitating toward the rock and roll guys like Eddie Murphy and Dice, like just the loud.
Yeah.
Those were the ones for me.
Well, you were what year were you born?
1975.
75. Okay, so you've got 7-8 years on me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you were a little older around that time.
Sure, yeah.
And I doubt my mom would have let me watch Eddie Murphy. I don't think that would
Well,
have been
I wasn't allowed. I
Yeah.
snuck. It
Yeah.
was a sneak and watch.
I also, when you're 10 versus 17,
Yeah,
trying to get your hands on stuff is very difficult.
definitely.
Because if it wasn't in the house, I wasn't getting it. I
Yeah.
don't have any money. I don't even have time at the music store alone, really.
Yeah.
To be like, what is this Andrew Dice Clay thing?
Right.
I didn't discover Dice till I was probably like 12, 13. And by then, I'm a teenager, and I'm going to throw a fit. And by that time, I started getting like Carlin records, and there started to be a lot more profanity in my house.
Well, your DNA is your comedy DNA is a little bit more thoughtful and educated and smarter than where I came from.
That might be the
Larry Miller, come on.
Larry Miller. I think the other thing that added to that was I knew I wanted to be a comic before I went to college.
Yeah.
Did you know that about yourself?
I knew I wanted to entertain because I was in
Okay.
sketch groups. I had like a sketch. My high school friends were all like making videos. We were really inspired by the Beastie Boys Sabotage video, so we're always like making sketches. And,
Yeah.
But I knew I wanted to do that. But when the groups would fight, and I was like, I just want to do my own thing. That's when stand-up became a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, there's a way I could just do it myself.
I remember as a kid watching stand-up on Comedy Central, and Kids in the Hall would come on.
Oh, they were my inspiration. Bruce McCulloch is one of my comedic, yeah.
As a kid, I would go, ugh, sketch, and I'd change the channel.
Yeah.
I didn't want to watch sketch at all.
Wow.
I didn't watch SNL at all.
Really?
I would watch the opening monologue, and then I would change it.
That's interesting.
I would tune in for Letterman. I'd watch the monologue, and then I would basically do something until waiting for the third segment in the hopes that a comic would come out.
Wow, you were honing in early.
Yeah, I was just really interested in that idea of an individual person standing and talking.
Wow.
And because I knew that about myself by the time I got into college, everything I was learning, I was trying to apply to stand up. So I wish
I had that foresight and that focus like you did.
Well, I was taking classes in like biological anthropology or history or whatever, and I'm sitting there the whole time paying attention going, all right, can I make a joke out of that? Is that good information for a joke? And just the whole time, didn't matter if it was psychology or political science. I was just wondering, how can I take this information to the stage?
You had that discipline from an early age.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And again, it's just knowing what I wanted and then trying to see if I could apply what I was learning to what I wanted.
So you're banging around in San Francisco, just getting up anywhere you can. And like, when do you get your first paid gig?
Probably in San Francisco at some point. The Bay Area wasn't necessarily. There weren't a lot of opportunities to hop in the car and go places and go out on the road. You know, I talked to Tommy Johnigan. We were both in our early 20s, and he has this resume of clubs he's worked.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at like the 3 or 4 clubs I've worked.
Yeah.
But I'm also noting like, oh, I've done all of these like one-night things at all of these random bars. And it was just amazing to think about him in St. Louis, and he could just drive to all sorts of cities within a few hours.
I'd actually throw you and Johnigan in the same like kind of class of comics, just wordsmiths and
we were both
oriented.
We were both working really hard, and we're
young
about the
guys.
same age, and just gravitating toward the idea that, oh yeah, if you work hard at this, you're probably gonna be able to make a living at it.
Yeah.
And that was all we thought.
Did you know each other like when you were early on? Did you guys kind of connect, or was it later on?
No, we were still in our early 20s, but we had both put in a few years before that.
Yeah.
Because I had opened for Greg Warren, I think in Indianapolis.
I just had Greg on the podcast, by the way.
And so Greg went back to St. Louis and was like, oh yeah, I just saw this young kid, Ryan Stout. I think you guys would like him. And so by the time I got to St. Louis, it was...
He's really good at like telling people about younger comics and stuff. He pays attention, man.
Yeah, he's a guy that watches.
I was driving when I drove from Ohio to here. I stopped in St. Louis to do their open mic, and Greg was actually talking to all the young guys and giving them tips. I go, this guy still has the energy for that. Good for you.
There is something fascinating that there's a different personality type between people who have an urge to share information and teach.
Yeah.
And people who don't. You know, some people, they're like, yeah, I just figured out how to do comedy, now I just do it. And other people are like, oh, you know what? I should remember this hurdle and how I got over it so that I can tell somebody else, and then they won't have to deal with this hurdle the way I did. And it's just a different personality type. Some people just have that urge.
Why not?
I don't know. Some people have an urge to teach, and other people have this mindset where they go, oh, they'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And even they'll figure it out is still kind of positive. They're still giving that person the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
Saying, it'll work out for you.
Yeah.
But those early days in San Francisco, I think probably the first time I got paid was the first time hosting at the Punchline.
Was that the first club you worked? Club?
No, I had hosted at the Comic Strip in El Paso, Texas, when I had gone back to like visit family and things like that. And so they were probably my first club.
Yeah.
Probably the first time giving me cash, but
right.
Yeah.
And then from there okay. And then when did you leave San Francisco?
So in 2005, I got selected to do the Boston Comedy Festival.
Oh, yes.
And so I flew across the country on a whim.
What's his name?
Jim McHugh.
Jim McHugh.
And I did that competition, and I won. And so it's a $10,000 comedy competition.
I remember that.
And it still happens today.
What year was that?
That was 2005.
That was the year I started comedy.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing about that.
So when I got back to San Francisco, my phone kind of started ringing, and it was managers, it was agents, it was festival people. Within a few weeks of being back. So I won that.
And that's when that festival was kind of hot. No
yeah,
disrespect.
It had just started.
Yeah.
So I got back in September. I won the festival in September. In October, HBO is having a showcase at the Punchline, and they tell the booker, Molly, they're like, is Ryan Stout going to be on the showcase? Because we want him on the showcase. And
Holy
she said,
balls.
Okay. So
How old are you at this time?
22,
Jesus.
23 maybe by this time. Because I was 22. I turned 23 at the end of September. Yeah.
Wow.
So I just turned 23. I showcased
23 with $10,000. You're rolling, dude.
Yeah. So I had done. I went. I did this audition. It was for HBO. Still had the Aspen Festival.
Yeah.
And that was the U.S. Comedy Arts Festival in Aspen, Colorado, which always seemed so classy.
Yeah.
It always sounded like a classy festival. And I don't know why they got rid of it, but it's gone now.
Yeah.
And then they were starting this brand new thing called the Comedy Festival in Las Vegas. And it was the association with TBS and HBO. And that was going to happen in November. So September, I win Boston. October, I audition for HBO. By November, I've got a manager, and I'm going to Vegas to do this brand new HBO festival. And then after that, I went to Aspen the next following March, but I had moved all my stuff to LA in February. So February 06, I moved to LA.
Okay.
Yeah.
I met you in 06, so that was my first year. I started in 2005, and it leaked over to 2006.
Yeah.
So I remember you were kind of running around then.
2006, I bet I was in Cleveland because I showed up to open for Emo Philips.
Oh, wow.
Because I had worked with Emo
Where did
somewhere.
Emo perform at?
Hilarities.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
that's great.
So Emo and I don't know where we worked together, but we got along so well, and we just kept in touch. And he was working in Cleveland, and I said, hey, man, I'd love to come out there. I still have family in Cleveland, so I have a place to stay. I don't even care if there's any money involved. I would just like to come with you and get in at that club.
Yeah.
And he made it happen.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
He still has one of my favorite dumb jokes of all time.
What is it? Can't be that dumb.
I once got in trouble for not opening the car door for a lady. Instead, I just swam to the top.
So, yeah.
It's so
It
silly.
just swam to the surface. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah. He's always had these. I don't know if you've ever watched him like riff a set, like set list and
I
stuff
worked with
like
him
that.
at Juniors in Erie years and years ago.
Yeah.
And he tried to mix it up a little bit.
It's so interesting, like when he does some sort of on the spot stand up show,
Yeah.
where they throw out a topic. You almost can't tell if he's just a savant with jokes or if he's just written so many jokes in his lifetime that he just taps into the Rolodex in his brain and pulls something out.
I think he is a savant because one time I tweeted at him and I was bored on the road and I just read a bunch of his tweets, which are hilarious if you follow Emo Philips on Twitter. And I just tweeted him. I go, what was it like being on the set of Miami Vice?
Uh-huh.
Within seconds, he tweets back in a quote tweet, "Why dwell in the pastel?" It was so funny and so silly and like the fact that he could come up with it within seconds because it was
seconds.
Yeah.
That is. It is amazing to watch his mind work.
Yeah,
because even though he's been at this for so long, he's got to be one of the quickest minds out there.
Yeah, he's a guy who should be talked about in some of the greats. He should be in the same category.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He certainly is, I think. Amongst comics,
Yeah.
we talk about him. And again, the comics are the people who are educated
Sure.
about who's in our field.
Yeah.
And so we talk about him.
Speaking of comics, I went to my questions. When did you start banging Nikki Glazer?
When did I start doing that?
I'm just kidding.
Start? No. Nikki and I were never like in a relationship.
I thought you guys dated.
No. Well, I guess we maybe tried to have some sort of thing like in 2010.
Okay.
But she was in New York and I was out here.
Oh, okay.
And so it was,
I thought I heard you guys dated.
no, not really.
Sorry to bring in the tabloid gossip, but
No, we talked a lot on the phone at one point, but
I thought you were boyfriend and girlfriend.
no, we were not. We were not an item at any time.
Look at that. I didn't know that. I went
Yeah.
through life thinking that.
I mean, listen, everybody can go through life thinking that because she's famous.
Yeah.
So you should absolutely believe
Should I
that
spread that?
Nikki and I were a hardcore couple, and that I got screwed out of that relationship, and she took
Ugh.
everything I had and just left me with nothing.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Tell me about it. Wow. Same with me and Marsha Warfield.
Terrible, terrible what happened to you.
So then you win this Boston Comedy Festival. You're killing it. You got $10,000. You're in L.A.
Yeah.
And, you're touring. You're doing
And
your
everything
thing.
starts over in L.A. You get to L.A. and people go, who are you? What's going on with you?
I just moved back. I lived here before. I'm starting over again.
Yeah.
It really is unbelievable. Like, I'm like, are you kidding me?
I've been here the whole time, and I have these young comics looking at me like, who the hell are you? And I'm looking at them going, really? You don't watch comedy? You don't know what was on television? You don't know anybody who's doing well on Spotify?
How do you not pay attention to your past?
I don't know.
Like, even with music, like if I like a band, I want to know who they were influenced by, and I start digging and digging and digging.
Yeah.
I don't understand how the younger comics don't do this.
There is a cultural phenomenon happening right now where I know that when I discovered a comic like Robert Schimmel,
Yes.
and I was a kid and I discovered Robert, I immediately went, whoa, what has this guy done? And I went back to try to like look at his discography, look at him on HBO, like, who is this guy? Oh, here's an interview with him on Howard Stern. Oh my God, I want to know more. Now, you just think about like Instagram. It just scrolls.
Yeah.
You're not clicking on somebody's photo and going, oh, I wonder what else they've posted.
Yeah.
Like everything in our culture is geared toward, well, what have you done for me lately?
So disposable.
It is so disposable, and that's why the people who make the most garbage are always at the top of the heap.
Yeah.
Because they're always in front of your face.
Yeah.
Versus somebody who's made a lot of good things gradually over the years. Nobody's even looking back at the good things.
I know,
The
man.
culture doesn't do that.
I don't understand that. It'll never connect with me, and I will always be that way. Like, I want to know substance over just what's there right now.
Yeah. And maybe we'll come back to it, but just where we're at right now, people don't have the attention span.
By the way, I just found out Robert Schimmel's daughter is married to Joe Rogan. I didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
I just found that out.
Oh, my God.
So his daughter is married to Joe Rogan.
Huh.
Yeah. There you go.
Which one? Which daughter?
I don't know.
Okay.
I just know it's Robert Schimmel's daughter. That's all I know. Yeah.
Fascinating.
That's a fact, unlike the Nikki Glaser, Ryan Stout.
Yeah, sure.
That was just I guess it was a rumor that I heard in a comedy condo somewhere.
Listen, I remember that period of time in 2010 where like Nikki came to LA and like she did stay at my place, and she actually got to LA. We hung out. I left town and went to Australia, and she stayed at my place.
Okay.
And we had kind of stayed in touch, and then she went to New York, and I remember being in Vancouver and like having some emails with her, and then we even like met up someplace on the road at one point, but yeah, it just wasn't a thing that ever lathered into anything.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to keep going back.
It's not as though we weren't in contact.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Well, you know, it's that in fact we're talking about you and Nikki, and I was watching. Where was I watching? I don't know when or where, but one of my favorite people, and I think you can agree, Henry Phillips. You being in his movie.
Yeah.
I love Henry. I had him on the podcast, and
I had a scene with Nikki Glaser.
That's
where we had previously dated.
Maybe that's where it came from.
Maybe
I was drunk watching that, and I made that all up in my head.
People are conflating a whole lot of ideas. They saw, They wanted to know, like, well, why wasn't Ryan on her Comedy Central show? Oh, it must be because they had a bad breakup. She hates him now. People are just creating stories. Yeah, that's what it is.
I know a lot of young comics listen to this, so I feel like I have a sense of education to it. Like I gotta put things in their head. So I hope I didn't steer you off course.
No, not at all.
Okay.
Not at all.
Fair enough.
Since there are young comics who listen to this, there's something that I've kind of been bouncing around in my brain recently, and it kind of goes back to the gender disparity thing.
Sure.
Since the internet started, you've had a group of people on the internet saying, hey, if you just work hard and you just do your thing and you make great work, you're bound to succeed. That was a certain philosophy that happened on the internet. Now, the other philosophy to counter that was a whole bunch of people going, no, that's not true, because that doesn't account for discrimination. It doesn't account for sexism. It doesn't account for homophobia. You can't just say work hard and you'll get ahead, because there's a whole group of people who get screwed over all the time.
Right.
So those are the two main philosophies.
Okay.
And I was thinking about those two things because I started thinking about the deification of Bill Hicks, like how many comics look up to Bill Hicks, and how many times I've heard people bag on comics who were inspired by Bill Hicks.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, great, another white guy who thinks he's Bill Hicks. And I was like, hang on a second. He's not trying to like go up and be edgy or like emulate Bill Hicks.
Yeah.
Like that's a different thing. Not every person who is inspired is going to emulate.
Right.
But there is one thing that happened with Bill Hicks that I think affected comedy in a big, big way, which was he died before he got famous. Now, when you die before you get famous, usually that happens because you left behind a huge body of work.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So now you have to combine those two thoughts with, oh, so if I keep my head down and work really, really hard and create a solid body of work, you're telling me I could be famous after I'm dead? Now, that is an intense thought process. And anybody who is infected with that type of thinking, they're playing a whole different game than anybody out there who's saying, well, I'm trying to get exposure so that I can get on TV and make money. Because what you're talking about is game theory, and you're talking about somebody who's playing an infinite game saying, oh, whatever happens to me in this life isn't a big deal. I can get picked for Comedy Central or I cannot get picked. I can get picked for The Tonight Show, and none of it matters. All that matters is the body of work I leave behind.
Yeah.
Versus another group of people who are saying, no, why don't I have exposure? Give me exposure. What about me? What about me? I should be the one who's on the sitcom. There's nobody like me on that show. Somebody should put me on that show.
Yeah.
You know, it's a very now mentality, which is a finite game.
Sure.
So you have infinite games versus finite games, and you've got a lot of straight white dudes who have this mindset of like, oh, if I just keep my head down and work real hard for a long time, maybe I'll be famous after I'm dead.
Right.
And that's almost insanity.
Yeah.
But it creates a huge body of work.
Yeah.
Which goes back to what we were talking about with white guys with a ton of albums.
Yeah.
And I
you
just
putting a bow on it.
What's that? Yeah.
You're putting a bow on it.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
cool.
Well, these are the thoughts I have during the day when I'm thinking about stand-up.
Sure. Not to throw you off your game with white guys, but you could say the same about Patrice O'Neill.
Yeah, listen, it is not the Bill Hicks philosophy is not exclusive to any race or gender.
Right.
But it does fit with that thing that happens on the internet, that argument that seems to be very divided along racial and gender lines,
Yeah.
and sexuality lines. Like if you're the person who's predisposed to believe, oh, if I just work really hard, things will work out.
Yeah.
You're more likely to also believe, oh, maybe I'll get famous after I'm dead.
I don't know what Judy Carter's doing right now, but this podcast is your one-on-one information, young comics. This is what you need. Pass it around. It's for free.
Yeah.
Tag a friend. If you could share it on your social media, that'd be fantastic. More importantly, let's pick up Ryan Stout's new album.
Yeah, Man in the Suit.
Where
Grab
you
that
can
one.
get across the
Number
board.
3 for me. I'm hoping to get famous after I'm dead, everybody.
Is it weird that not you in particular, but I hope one of the comics I've had on this podcast, like something big happens and I can just use that episode to, like maybe Ryan Stout dies and I'm like, this was it.
This was his moment. This is where it all came together. He finally figured out that thing. And I have a deep fear of being misunderstood. And it infects itself into everything that I do, where I don't want to say something and make somebody angry and make them assume that I'm saying something that I'm not. So I just want to clarify, like if you're one of the comics that has that infinite game mindset where you are trying to work toward the future, or if you're a comic who is like, no, I want to live for now. I want to go on stage and create something right now that only exists in this moment. I'm not saying that one of those philosophies is better or worse.
Right.
I'm just saying they're different.
Yeah.
And I'm not bagging on anybody who has any type of thought process about what they do. As long as you're creating stuff, I'm on your side.
Sure.
Like I'm on the comedian side across the board.
Yeah.
Way more so than I'm on the audience's side.
Right.
Fuck those people. All they do is sit there and look at the stage. Jesus Christ, they didn't even take a class or read a book. You're just going to sit there? Please.
You're one of my favorite guys. You're a great comic.
Thanks, dude.
Where can people find you on social media?
At Stout Ryan on Twitter.
That's right.
Ryan Stout on Facebook, Ryan Stout on YouTube. Yeah, go to ryanstout.com.
And pick up the album. Can we play a track from your album?
Yeah, you could play a track.
It's a little taste.
A lot of people have been talking about, there's a track called American Culture.
Yeah.
And
what number is that so I can timestamp it?
I believe it's number 4.
Okay.
I believe.
This is
If
number...
my memory's correct.
Okay, well, I'll find it.
Okay.
We're going to play a track right now. Go pick up Ryan's album. Thanks for listening, guys. Leave a 5-star review. We'll talk to you soon. That's a wrap.
I travel the globe and people will ask me, they'll be like, Ryan, you're an American. What is American culture? And I go, football, hamburgers, apple pie, baseball. I'm just naming foods and sports. And again, did you notice how some people got weird on the question? What is American culture? You got it on your faces like, oh, we should know this one. What is in the culture? What is constantly told to all of us, regardless of our race or sex or gender, all the time? What is always told to us? And I thought about it real hard. What is the one message that we have in America? Americans just want to have a good time. All the time. It starts in the morning, you wake up and you look around, you go, not a fun time, this sucks. Let's have caffeine and sugar right away and start having a good time. Let's get it going right now. You get in your car to go to work, you sit there, traffic sucks, not a good time. So what do? You turn on the radio, there's two morning local yokels going back and forth. We're gonna have people into the studio this morning, and if they can snort a pile of toenail clippings, we're gonna give them tickets to Daughtry, everybody. And you're sitting there, and it's not great radio, but you're like, this is better than traffic, so I guess I'll be fine with this. Have a good time, have a good time. You get to work, you're 3 minutes early, and you go, I'm not going in there. I'm just gonna sit in the car and play a game on my phone for a little while. Have a good time, have a good time, have a good time. We even changed the idea of work. It used to be that everybody in America worked and everybody understood the concept. Everybody went, work sucks. Yes, it does. And that was the end of it. But you know what we did with stuff that sucks? Very American thing. We rebranded. We told a whole generation of Americans, don't work. Just get a job that you love and you'll never work a day in your lives. But before you go into that job that you love so much, maybe take like an Oxycontin or a Vicodin. You just want to be loose. You want to be loose. Have a good time at work. You're just driving a city bus. It'll be fine. Have a good time. You get out of work at 5 o'clock, and you know what happens at 5 o'clock? You're done with work, your buzz is gone, but it's time for happy hour. Oh my God, the party continues. And people flood into bars, and they drink for 2 hours, and they look at their watches, and it's 7 o'clock, and they go, oh, prices are going up. That is not a good time. Everybody rushes home, and they watch game shows and sitcoms and Netflix, and they just feed their brain, have a good time, have a good time, have a good time. And then everybody lays down in their Craftmatic adjustable beds. And they go to sleep, and they wake up, and they do the same shit again the next day. In American culture, have a good time, have a good time. There's no real highs and no real lows. You just chase the good time, and then you die. Oh, but that was another thing we had to deal with, because death sucks. Death is the worst thing. And we didn't want to deal with that. We didn't want to deal with the mourning and the pain and the hurt. So you know what we did? We rebranded. And we said, this isn't going to be about sadness. We're not going to deal with death. This is going to be a celebration of life. When you come to the funeral, don't wear black. Don't be an asshole. Everybody will wear a Hawaiian shirt, because that's what Kevin would have wanted. We're going to have a water balloon fight at the cemetery. People are going to bring Rice Krispie treats. It's going to be a good time. America! And I don't know if you know what that flat line is in psychology with no highs and no lows, just a flat line. Even if it feels good the whole time, you know what that line is in psychology? Depression. So now, no matter where I am, people are like, what's American culture? I go, we're depressed. Come by, have a churro.